I lost my son, who was 27 years old, on January the 24th, 2013. He was always a little bit of an extremist to some degree. He certainly gave me a run for my money, being my oldest child. I don't know when addiction began for him. I'm not one of the families that my son stole from and lied to and deceived, and I didn't go through those things with him. I think that we were both so stigmatized in a lot of ways that he himself called it the dope fiend shuffle. He would make fun of it, and I didn't think, it never crossed my mind that he would do heroin at all, and because he was one of the most smartest people I know. And truly, in many ways, I looked up to him in so many things because I trusted him to be okay. And I really felt like he was, I knew that he was struggling. He had lost a finger. It just...
When you said he lost a finger, did he have to go and get surgery?
Yes, he did. But I think things happened for him far earlier than that. I firmly believe that addiction may very well come into play with youngest exposure. I have a lot of different ideas in my head, but all of it comes from what I'm learning from the professionals, from what I'm reading, what I'm understanding. And for him, I believe it began with an injury when he broke an ankle, and he was given pain medication, and he begged me for that medication. And, I called the pediatrician, and I'm telling him he's in pain, he's begging for this. And he says, give him Tylenol and stagger the medicine. He certainly cannot have more. And we took him off, as the prescription ran out, that's it. And he did tell me at one point that that's the place that he remembers earliest of wanting to be high.
How old was he?
He was probably 12 when that happened.
So he knew what it felt like.
Going back, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And I think that he then spent the rest of his life obtaining something close to that or that feeling. And I think when he lost the finger, the opiates were easy to use, they were there, and when they stopped giving him the opiates is when, obviously, is when he used the heroin. And Nathan was not a classic overdose. He died with less than 40 milligrams of heroin in his body. 75 milligrams or more is what classifies as an overdose. But that's part of why I'm at this place where I've joined this group, because I'm starting to understand that these are the deaths that many don't even realize. We classify it as overdose because everybody understands, okay, overdose, he died of an opiate. But it doesn't have to be a large dose. It doesn't have to be a small dose for a regular user. It can happen, and then they're gone, and you're learning as you are coming out of that grief exactly where your child was and how deep the stigma was, to where there was never a time, and we talked about everything. Never was there a time that he said, "Mom, I'm struggling so hard, I'm using heroin." It never happened. And I believe that that's from the stigma. And I believe that that window is very small. And that's what, I lost his soul out that window. And I understand in the group, I don't think there's been an active member who has lost a child. There's lots of members whose children have had overdoses but have survived. And so I think that I bring a little more loss to the table, but at the same time, There is healing in that, because we all know we would die for our children. That goes without even asking. We know we would do that. But nobody talks about if you can live after the death of your children. And what does that look like? You know, what does it look like when your child has died from a substance passing? What does that feel like? Because it's a little different for me. When someone asks me how I lost my son, do I say prescription drug overdose to make it look prettier? Or do I say my son died of a small dose of heroin? You know, where do you open the dialogue? Where does it become okay to where I'm not going to be looked at like somehow I failed?
I hear that a lot from all these moms thinking that this is their fault. Do you feel like that still after all this time?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm at a place where I have felt every fault that could be found. I've beat myself up, and I've tortured myself. But there comes a time where that has to stop, because other moms really need to know that they're doing the right things, or they're asking the right questions, or because I don't think that I did. You know, I don't think that I did, because there was never any apparent IV drug use. The medical examiner commented on that. We're talking about a perfectly healthy 27-year-old male who didn't even have a cavity. You know? So it's a hard pill to swallow. You know? And it all comes from addiction. I don't understand. I've struggled with the moral issue. I don't believe that it's a moral issue. I think that it is very much a medical one, and I think science is backing that up more and more day by day, and that's a big deal. You know, and I think it's going to change how we address it.
You have other children, right?
I do.
How many?
I do. I have 3 other children.
Are they younger?
They're younger. They're all younger.
Do you think it forced them to grow up faster, seeing what happened to your son?
Wow. It was such a shock. I would have to say, I don't know that it forced them to grow up anymore, because he was buried on his brother's. I have twin sons as well, and he was actually buried on their 21st birthday. I mean, he wasn't buried. I couldn't bear to bury him. I had him cremated, and I have him in a box because I can't bear to part with him yet. But I understand one day I will need to find a final resting place for him, because not everyone's going to want to tote around Nathan long after I'm gone. You know, he didn't have any children. He had never been married. So I feel like, you know.
Reality for some young people. But do you feel like they have a better understanding of the danger, considering what they've seen in their life?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I would ever have to worry about that with my other 3 children. Drug usage is not on the table for them, you know, and it is. They watch Nathan struggle through his teenage years. They watch the battle between me and him, and the battle of the wills, and they learned very early that they're not going to win. I was going to win, and there was times that I had to push Nathan away from us when he was really being, just wild and off the hook. Because I had the 3 other kids to think about. I cannot let them see you come home like that, because it's going to be okay for them. So I have to fight this battle with you. You're too old to have this battle. When he started hitting 19 and 20, you have to make those decisions. You have to go home to your own house, not where your younger brothers are watching, and so, yeah.
You said you weren't really sure when heroin started, right?
Yeah.
It could have been anything, and because he was getting the prescription from
the surgery, right? He stopped the prescription. They stopped the prescriptions because they have very clear protocols, and they're not going to continue to give them those types of medications. And that's when his drug-seeking behavior, I think, is really where it manifested. To me, I'm thinking he's struggling with the pills. And when we talk about that, he's like, I got this. I got this under control. So, it just blew my mind. In the past 2.5 years since he died, being highly sensitive and very aware of what is going on, literally around me, literally around his friends, their external groups of friends, and on and on. I think that the one thing we need to do is open up the dialogue. We've got to stop being so silent about addiction. We need to separate the moral issue from the medical issue. You cannot mandate morals. You can mandate medicine. And you can control what is being put into the hands. The FDA just approved the use of OxyContin in patients that are 12 years old. If it's end of life and palliative care, then absolutely none of us want to watch a young child suffer. By all means, give them all means of palliative care. Addiction is not a concern here. They're not going to live out the course of their disease to develop an addiction. But when we're talking about children who are dealing with a broken bone or anything that's traumatically altering, that they would need some type of pain management, I don't think that they need to be released to go home. There was a time we did not release people from the hospital when they had broken limbs or life-altering traumatic injuries. They stayed in the hospital. Their medications were literally managed until they were able to provide for themselves. We can't go back. We can't win that fight. But we can start today on how many of these opiates are getting outside of a hospital. It just shouldn't be. It just shouldn't be.